Hey, everybody. Welcome to Right in Front of My Face, the podcast talking about big things right in front of us. I am your host, Shannon Hull, and I am recording this intro on November 3rd, 2020. It's the day of the biggest election I've ever seen in my life, and I admit that I'm in the throes of anxiety about the state of the world. I had a new episode all set to drop tomorrow, but then as the week went on, it just didn't feel right to put it out right after the election. It feels to me like we all need a pause on information and intensity for just a minute. My new episode features a conversation with Rob Turner, host of his own podcast called Fat, Drunk, and Stupid. He's a former cop turned coder living in Missouri. He is very different than me, but we had a great conversation about police training versus his Army training. But you know what? It can wait another week. The right thing to do felt like reissuing an episode that centers on peace. Last March, I reached out to Kwabi Amoah-Forson to see if he could shed some light on the work he's doing in Tacoma, Washington, and his outreach to his community, serving food to kids who didn't have access to breakfast once schools shut down. Kwabi runs his own nonprofit called the Peace Bus. He talked to me about his definition of peace, how he intends to educate kids on diplomacy, and what one person can do to foster peace in their own community. The conversation is as relevant today as it was in March, and what better time to talk about peace than the day after a big election? Enjoy. I have the founder of the Peace Bus, Kwabi Amoah-Forson. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on. I know your time is precious right now, but I do also know that you have more of it.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you having me on the show. Right now today I have lots of time. Earlier today I was doing some deliveries, but yeah, thank you so much, Shannon, for allowing me to be on here. It's really cool.
I found you through researching another potential guest, but I saw your profile on the City U website. I want to say it was maybe 5 months ago or so, but I started following you on Instagram and became a fan immediately because you are directly serving many populations in Tacoma. And it's one of the first times that I have seen somebody really become an activist in their own right to kind of become their own agent of change. It's pretty cool what you're doing, and it's pretty cool the calling that you've found. So what I'd like to do is kind of start at the beginning. Kwabi, if you don't mind giving a little background about your family, who you are, and then talk to me a little bit about why you decided to start the Peace Bus.
So, yeah, my name's Kwabi. I'm from University Place, Washington, a little suburb area of Tacoma. My dad is an environmental engineer, has a doctorate in engineering. My mom has 2 masters, and she's into counseling. And my brother, he is a high school English teacher. And so my family is pretty, as far as academics are concerned, that was the biggest emphasis in my family growing up.
You do have a family of brainiacs.
Yeah, pretty much. Really what it comes down to is just a family of people who are just really diligent and passionate about whatever they do. Granted, I wasn't going to become an engineer. It's not my niche, but my dad's really passionate about that. Everything that we do, as we make sure that we're passionate about it. I mean, why else do something, right, if you're not passionate about it? So, yes, I graduated from Curtis, and then I went to Western Washington University. I went to Evergreen State College, and I got my master's at City University of Seattle.
And so what was your college degree in?
Oh, my undergrad was in liberal arts, just liberal arts. I didn't know what I wanted to do for the longest time. I was sort of going through the motions. When I was at Western, I flunked out. So I was there and I was playing reggae music. I wanted to be a musician. And so my grades went down. My mom actually came up to Bellingham and was like, yeah, you're going to come back home. What are you doing with your life? And I was like, no, Mom, I want to stay in Bellingham. And then she grabbed me and took me home. And so I quit music for a couple of years. I like to call that I was getting my head on straight in order to be able to focus on academics. And so I got my GPA back up. I went to TCC for a little stint, and I got my GPA back up, and then I transferred to Evergreen. Yeah.
That's awesome. I love your mom.
Yeah, she's awesome. She's really about it. That's the best way to put it. She's about it, about education. So granted, at the time I was distraught, but looking back at it, it was the best thing for me. not to say that music's a bad route. Music is awesome, and I still play music today. But she knew that there was something else for me. And so when I was actually in grad school, I was, doing my business. I was in business school, so I'm just doing, my classes or whatnot, but I still felt unfulfilled. A lot of people, they're in school, that's it. Like, I'm here, I'm doing my thing. And I was doing that. I was also working at the same time at a veterinary clinic.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, for me, it's pretty random. I love animals, but I mean, it was really random that I worked there, but awesome people that worked at the animal emergency clinic. I want to say what's up to Dr. Hicks. That guy's awesome. But I was still feeling unfulfilled. And so I started doing self-reflection. I was challenged by a school counselor of mine to really dig deep and figure out what kind of person do I want to be? Not like what occupation, but like who am I? Like, who do I want to be? And so I started thinking, if I didn't have all these different characteristics of myself, say, I'm an African-American male who grew up in Tacoma, Washington, my family is this or that, what would I want out of my life? Right? Which is it's an arduous task to take upon yourself, because you're literally stripping your quote unquote identities from yourself to really figure out what's inside. And so I thought to myself, well, at the bare bones, I would want the world to be at peace and to see that in action, right? And so I started learning more about the peace movement. Granted, my mom had done a really good job of educating me on people like Martin Luther King Jr. and a lot of people who were working for civil rights and the betterment of all humanity. And so I had that basis, Gandhi, awesome people, James Lawson, and I came across like modern peace activists. That was my idea. Like, who's doing this now? Like Martin Luther King, great, awesome. 60s. He's the 60s. Yeah. Who's doing this now? And I came across this guy named Brian Haw. Folks back home, you should research this guy. It's Brian Haw. And he was a peace campaigner from London, England. And this guy was a normal guy, just minding his own business. And he heard about the military sanctions that were happening. This is like 2001, 2000, the military sanctions that Bush and Blair were putting on the Middle East, countries in the Middle East, which were preventing kids and families from getting food, basically, and clean water. And so he camped outside of Parliament Square, where they do all their litigation and things like that. He camped outside of their facility with this peace camp, and he would just talk to people about what was going on. He had this crazy philosophy, which I believe in too, which is that no matter where we come from, no matter our race, religion, our creed, that we are equal based off our humanity. Like, we're human beings. We really need to hone in on that. And so I was inspired. Immediately heard about the guy, watched all his videos. I was like, oh my God, this is it. And so he camped outside there for 11 years, and then he died. So my thing was, well, if Brian could camp outside for 11 years, the least I can do is like make some peace signs and go to my local park and just talk to people about peace. And so I didn't really know what I was doing. I don't know. I went online, made these 2 posters, and I went out to the park, Wrights Park here in Tacoma. And every Saturday I would sit there and people would walk up. I'd play classical music, sort of add to the peaceful atmosphere. People would come up and like, what are you doing here?
And Brian Haw, so I did some research as you suggested that I do.
Okay.
This guy was crazy. I mean, he was so passionate. He left his entire family. I think he had 7 kids. He left his entire family to take up this cause because he didn't feel like he could live with himself unless he tried to make the world a better place for these 7 children.
Yeah. He's amazing. He had this idea, like the notion that the kids in the Middle East were his kids. We're all a part of this entire large family, this global family. That was his mindset. It's amazing. It's amazing.
Okay, so you have your eyes opened when you're in the middle of school and you're like, I'm going to do something.
You gotta do something. After watching Brian, I just got to do something. And so, I started doing this peace camp. And I was doing that. I was going out every Saturday. And then one Saturday, I got attacked. This random gentleman, severely mentally ill, something about me and what I was doing triggered something, and he ran up on me and he kicked my table over, tore up my posters, threw my megaphone, broke it, got in my face with his fist clenched, and he was yelling at me. I didn't present myself abrasively. I'm here with promoting peace. And so for something in his mind sensed that I wasn't going to come at him violently. So he ran off before anything could escalate. And the next Saturday I came back out and I was really paranoid because I was like, is this dude going to come back out and hit me? Like, what's going to happen? So a bad thing, which turned out to be a good thing because it compelled me to go to different parts of Tacoma and do the same thing. And so I started traveling with my posters, my peace posters. And so from there, I went to Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, and I brought my 2 posters. One said love, peace, and justice for all. The other one said war is not the answer, say no to violence. And I would just talk to everyday people about what that meant to them. Like, what does peace mean to you? That was the main question. And then I went to Vancouver, BC. And then I had a friend who was stationed in the Netherlands, and he hit me up. He was like, hey, you haven't came to see me yet. Why not come and bring your posters? And I was like, I don't know about that. And that was 2017. And at that time, there was terrorist attacks that were happening in London and in Belgium at that specific time, like in the beginning of the summer. I told my dad about it. He was like, don't do it. I told my mom about it. She was like, don't even think about doing it.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. How do your parents feel about you doing this?
Well,
at that point.
At that point, it was just it was a no-go. It was just like, why would you risk your life for this? Or, you've never even been out of the country before. And the first time you go out of the country, you're going to promote peace and talk to random strangers?
Seems reasonable.
Exactly. It's really crazy. But you know what I did? I wasn't sure if I was going to do it, but I brought my posters in my suitcase just in case to see how I felt when I got there. And when I stepped at Amsterdam and I met up with Austin, my buddy Austin, there was just no question. I was like, I have to do it. And so I went to Amsterdam, walked around there, talked to people, London, went to Belgium, of course. I actually talked to Belgian soldiers. Their English wasn't the best. And, my French isn't the best, obviously. I don't speak it. But
or at all.
Yeah, at all. But they saw the posters, and I asked them if I could come and just talk to them a little bit. And they asked why, why this? I was like, I'm trying to show love and compassion. No, like, we don't want any more war. And they both nodded, like, we don't want any more war. Like, we're done with this. And I got a picture with them. So that was a really cool moment. But so basically, I went to Europe in 2 different occasions. The second time I went to Ireland, Iceland, Germany. And so when I got back home, my friend Kevin Wolford, he said, well, you got all this experience from asking people this question of what peace is. Why not do some videos? And so I was like, okay, well, I've never really done that before, but sure. So he was behind the camera. We started doing a couple of videos. We did about 10 podcast videos, these video podcasts. I call it the Real Peace Podcast.
Yeah, I have watched them. I got schooled.
Cool. So I think that was like 2018 when that was happening. And just interviewing everyday people in my community about topics I felt that were peace related. How can we get along? What is the role of violence in our society? What are 10 things we love about life? Like, that's something as simple as that. And did that for a while. And I'm always doing research. I never stops because we never should stop learning. And so I came across this guy named A.B. Nathan. Amazing guy. I don't know if you know of him either, but this guy, everyone should look him up too. He was a humanitarian. So basically, he had an airplane he called the Peace One, and he was a fighter pilot in the Israeli army. But when he was done, he wanted to promote better relations between Jews and Arabs. So he flew an airplane from Tel Aviv to Cairo to promote that. Wow. And so after that, he made like headlines, and the people of Israel saw him as a hero. And so he started using that publicity, not just for himself, but to promote peace on a grander scale. And so he would take aid to different disasters that were happening, natural disasters, people that were suffering from hunger. He would take aid to them. And then he also had a radio station called The Voice of Peace. And in that radio station, it was completely dedicated to solidarity and peace of the entire world. And I was like, this guy's amazing. So me, when I see something amazing, I get inspired from it and I try to do something. And so I started taking flight lessons. And so
no way. I did not know that.
Yeah, it's crazy. So I still do want to do this. I want to be the first person. I like affirmation. So I will be the first person to circumnavigate the globe in promotion of world peace. And so that was my goal. It still is my goal. And I took about 7 flight lessons, and flight lessons are very expensive. So I was losing money. And so I had to stop it. But I thought to myself, well, what do I have that I can use? I already have a driver's license, so I thought, well, what if I could have a peace vehicle that I could drive around town and promote peace, whatever that looks like. I didn't know at the time what that looked like. So I came across this Mitsubishi 1988 van on Vashon Island. This guy named Jason was selling it. And I told him about my dream, my vision of having a peace vehicle, and he loved it. And I met with him, awesome, genuine guy. It was in really good condition, the van was. And he sold it to me for about $3,200. And I bought it with my income tax. I didn't have the money just from the get-go. I used my income tax to buy it. And then when I got it painted blue from Mako for $800. And then I went to Rap Jacks in Parkland, and they put the Peace Bus on the side. I told them my favorite font of all time is Cooper Black, and so I had to have it, that font.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And then from then, I just started driving it around. My idea at first was I'll just drive it around. People see the Peace Bus, and maybe it will compel them to research peace in the movement. Then I came up with the idea, as long as I'm there's a big space in the Peace Bus. I don't know if people know this, but there's the back seats that are far back, and then there's the 2 front seats. So there's space to carry. So I thought about, I'm a social worker, basically. I'm a case manager for a mental health organization.
That's what I was going to get to, is that, you are working full time. You've graduated. Yeah. You've graduated with your MBA.
Yeah.
Right. In this whole scheme. Back up a little bit and talk to me about why you wanted to go back and get your MBA.
Oh, it was kind of like on a, not on a whim, but it was kind of like default. When I finished my undergrad degree, every year after that, which was 3 years consecutively, I had applied to the Evergreen State College, their MPA program, so Masters in Public Administration. Okay. And I got declined every year. So the 3rd year, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to apply to 2 schools this year and just see what happens. And yeah, I knew that I was pretty business minded, and that at some point I would want to create my own business in the future. Got it. So I got denied again from the Evergreen State College MPA. So I went with City University. I didn't want to. That's the thing about time. Time keeps on going. So whether you like it or not, right. The year that you're not doing anything is a year that you could have been in school. So I went in that route, which was the best thing for me. I didn't know I was going to be creating the Peace Bus a couple of years after that, but
yeah, funny the way things work out, isn't it?
Yeah, but just the things that I learned there are definitely applicable to what I'm doing now, which is awesome.
We're going to take a quick break to hear from right in front of my face sponsors. I am sitting here with John Gruce from Element Mortgage. Talk to me about mortgages.
Yes, crazy. It is an absolutely crazy market out there. If you've been paying attention to anything in the news, you've heard that interest rates are at historically low levels. That is true. Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, the 2 major government entities, have reported that the interest rates currently are at the lowest level they have ever seen. So it's definitely an exciting time in the industry right now for us.
So I've owned a house for 16 years and I still don't fully understand the mortgage business.
Not something you do every day. That's okay.
It's not. So tell me a little bit about where you're licensed to do business and who can get in touch with you.
Absolutely. We're actually licensed in 48 states through our parent company, which is American Pacific Mortgage. Our brand, Element Mortgage, we have 4 locations based in Washington, California, Colorado, and Hawaii. So in terms of working directly with us, that's our footprint. But if you're in any of the other 48 states, we have the ability to assist.
So the line that always gets me is whatever you've got, we've got you. Tell me a little bit about the philosophy behind Element Mortgage.
Really, it's about focusing on the consumer and their needs and providing options. You know, you hear about refinancing right now. Well, what does that mean? Should I refinance? I'm already maybe a few years into my loan. Does it make sense? With where interest rates are today, it absolutely is worth it to explore your options. And that's what we provide. We provide an expert element. That's part of our business. We're local, so we know what's going on in the local market area. And again, as you mentioned, the human element. It's a major part of this. Again, you don't buy or refinance a home very often. So it is important to have a team that's behind you that you can trust when going through a major transaction like this.
Thank you so much for your support of Right in Front of My Face.
My pleasure.
And if anybody needs John, his information will be up in the show notes. And how do they get in touch with you, John?
Easy. Give me a call, 206-954-4787, or hit our website, elementmortgage.com. John Bruce, NMLS number 1108421. Element Mortgage is a division of American Pacific Mortgage, NMLS number 1850, equal housing opportunity.
Welcome back to my chat with Kwabi Amoah-Forson. Okay, so you get your MBA, you buy this bus, you have it wrapped, you have it, it's the font you want. Mm-hmm. So you look at the big space in your bus and you're thinking, how do I use it?
Yeah. So how can I utilize the space? So then I thought, well, as a caseworker, as a social worker, I learned over the years of necessities, right? Most of my clients are suffering through some sort of poverty or destitution. And I would, over the years, I just asked them, from having conversations, like the things that they need. And socks and pants were the two largest things that were needed, other than like food and obviously shelter. The socks, blankets, and pants. And so I thought, well, why don't I start a sock drive and distribute socks with the Peace Bus? And so I started this was the first campaign, which was the first sock drive. So it was me, I started it. I had a couple of friends helping me through GoFundMe. We got maybe $500, went to Costco, bought $500 worth of socks, and we distributed them in the community. And that was the beginning of what sort of the Peace Bus, what we do. That was sort of the beginning of it. And that was probably one of the best experiences for me. During that time, we went to a congregate care facility. It's basically like a nursing home, but for those who are severely mentally ill and probably won't be able to afford an actual nursing home. And people that are there, they're in need. They're older folks. And my buddy John was passing out socks. He's behind me. And this gentleman comes out of his room and John gives him a pair of socks. He's like, well, what are you doing? And he's like, well, these are free. And he's like, really? And John's like, yeah, do you want another pair? The guy almost lost it. He's like, another pair of socks? And he gives John a hug and he's crying. John's crying. Oh my goodness.
And then all of a sudden, affirmation.
Yeah, I know, right? All of this was for something.
It all means something. So exactly. I told you earlier that I had watched your interview on A New Day, and you said something that I'd never thought about before, but it definitely resonated. And you said that food, clothing, and shelter are what peace means to you, right? That those fundamental things that people need to actually live their life and not just survive it.
Correct. So that was an inference. It was a hypothesis that I had that was confirmed through the Peace Bus journey to the Mexican border. So I had taken the Peace Bus this last summer to the border of Mexico to interview Border Patrol agents. On the way there and back, we were giving out socks and blankets to people in the major cities on the West Coast. And I was talking to these people, and I was talking to, people that are just, minding their own business and walking around. And that was confirmed. Food, clothes, and shelter were brought up when I would ask the question, what does peace mean to you? In all of these places, that was a theme that kept on popping up. And so when I was on New Day, that's just what it was confirmed for me. And what I get from that is that without those essential needs, you're in survival mode. You know, we talk about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You cannot pursue your happiness without having your needs met. I talk about that. You're not living, you're just surviving. And so when we are allowed to have access to those things, then we can start going about living a peaceful life.
It really touched me deeply when I heard you say that, and even thinking about it now, in these specific circumstances that we're in, being quarantined, and all you have to do is go online and you can see people we're starting to get restless.
Yeah.
Right? We're in this for another 3 weeks, but people are not happy. And I think when I watched your interview, I just thought, oh my God, this is so timely for this particular interview, because I want your opinion on how you think our peace will be affected by being so isolated. And we don't, I think some people, myself, I've got the fundamental things I need to survive, right? Like, I'm not fighting for food, clothing, and shelter. Mm-hmm. But there are a lot of people right now that are, or in 1 month from now, when rent is due and it's their third paycheck cycle in quarantine and they haven't been able to work, I think that's going to rock the foundation for a lot of people.
Yeah. Hopefully this stimulus package, this money that Trump's supposed to give us, or the government's supposed to give us, that comes through and is able to help families that might be displaced due to the coronavirus. I really hope that happens. And possibly if another month extends, that they'll be able to have some more funds available for these people. But yeah, finding peace during the quarantine, I believe that comes with, first and foremost, and I'm sure it's said often enough, but counting your blessings. You explained, Shannon, that your needs are met as far as like the fundamentals, yep, which is fantastic. And for myself, it's the same deal. And so when I'm getting up in the morning and I do feel isolated, I have my phone. I can call my mom. I can call my brother. They're doing the same thing. They're quarantining. We're having conversations. We're having long phone conversations. Along with that, this quarantine time is it's giving us time to reflect. We move so fast in our day and age. We're moving consistently all the time. And to have this space and time in order to take a step back, breathe in, and think about all the things that have happened in your life to get you to this point, and take a time of self-reflection. And so when it's time to go back, we'll be ready.
I'm going to replay that every single morning when I wake up, Kwabi. Honestly. I'm just going to hit play before I open my eyes, and because I know that you're right. But before we get into that, because I do want to return to that conversation, I want you to kind of take us through still your journey. So you start off with a sock drive.
Correct. And it wasn't, that's the thing, it was only $500, and through that, we were able to help people in our community that really needed it. And so at that time, there was a lot of things going on in the media with the immigration crisis. You could see families being pulled away from each other down at the border, these detention centers. There was more awareness towards this. And I heard CNN saying this, Fox News saying that, MSNBC saying this. And so I was like, well, what's really going on? And so I had this crazy idea that I could drive the Peace Bus to the border of Mexico and interview Border Patrol agents about what's going on, which is completely ridiculous. But I've often noticed with my life, so far, these things that I think are ridiculous, they seem to happen. And so if I just trust in myself, believe in myself, maybe we'll see what happens. And that's sort of like the motif of my life. I roll the dice and just see what happens. And so I put it out there. I was like, yes, me and the Peace Bus, we're going to the border. And it really resonated with people because people want to know the truth. Obviously,
yes,
truth is very popular.
Yes.
So funds came in, donations came in, and we got enough money. Me and I call them the Peace Crew. So it was me, my buddy Kevin, my buddy John, and my buddy Daniel. And we took the Peace Bus and drove to the border. And when we got to LA, I had called the Border Patrol before we left, and we're like, hey, I'm Kwabi from the Peace Bus. Can we come and interview you guys? And they're like, no, you can't. Who are you? And I was like, yeah, that makes sense.
Hard no on that one.
Yeah, like, no, like, do you see what's going on in the media? Like, we can't have random people coming to interview us. But when we got to LA, my buddy Kevin was like, hey, the least you can do is call him. The worst they can say is no. So I call him back, and I was like, hey, I'm in LA with the Peace Bus, wondering if we could come to San Diego and interview the Border Patrol. They said no. So before I'm about to hang up, they're like, hey, wait a minute. What's this Peace Bus all about? And I was like, well, the Peace Bus, we interview people about peace, and we try to create solidarity with conversation to try to get a better understanding of who we are and where we come from. And the agent was like, well, send me your information.
And you're like, so you're saying there's a chance.
I know, so you're saying there's a chance. Exactly. So he calls me back an hour after, and he's like, okay, we want to see the bus. We just want to see the bus. So I was like, all right, cool. So the next day we go to San Diego, we go to the headquarters, and they say, we want to see the bus. So they look at the bus, like, wow, this is really from Tacoma? This is from Seattle? And I was like, yeah. And they were amazed that we actually came down here. And so they're like, okay, well, we'll give you guys a ride in our do a patrol in our car, and you can just ride with us.
No way.
So, which is, yeah, it's ridiculous. So we're in their truck, Border Patrol truck, and I have my phone out, and I asked one of the gentlemen, I was like, is it okay if I ask you questions? If not, I understand. And he looks back, he's like, yeah, fine. You ask us questions, just make sure you're not in our face, give us space, and if we don't want to answer something, don't ask it again.
What's the if you meet up with someone and they're like, I'm seeking asylum, what happened is there obviously the route's different, like what happens then?
You just transport them back to the station and then start the process. You want to identify them, and we facilitate all the paperwork, and then hopefully move them on to ICE.
So we asked all the questions we thought people up here wanted the answers to, and we recorded it all. And
did they know? Did they know they were being recorded? I mean,
yes,
obviously.
Yeah. If you go on thepeacebus.org, you scroll down. We have all the videos that we took with the Border Patrol and all the questions we asked. Granted, like there were I couldn't set up my camera, and like present it in that
here
fashion.
It is.
Yeah. But it's there, and so we did that. And then when we got back home to Tacoma, King 5 News was like, this is crazy. Like, you guys actually did this. And so I got on the news several different times.
Yeah.
And sort of in the fashion of A.B. Nathan, using that publicity to promote more peace. And so I used that to build relations with the schools here in Tacoma. And I started going to schools, talking to kids about nonviolence, sort of starting this educational program. I had this thing called the Peace Ball. It's around here somewhere. But basically, it's a beach ball, right? And on every panel is a question dealing with peace. And so we pass it around the classroom. Here it is. So I throw it in the classroom, and when a kid catches it, they ask a question. So this one says, what is one peaceful thing you can do today? And the kid reflects on it and tries to answer the question, which sparks a conversation in the classroom that we can all talk about. And sooner or later, we start having a full-on conversation about peace, which is something that doesn't happen every day. And so I've been going to schools and doing assemblies. And then we did our second sock drive, which was in response to the tent ban that happened in December.
That's when I found you. That's when I did a search, and I caught you right as you were starting your second sock drive.
Okay. Yeah, that one was bigger. It was bigger because there was even bigger need, because there was going to be individuals who are going to be displaced due to the ban. So December 3rd in Tacoma, it would be illegal to be in a local park, And so tons of people were displaced from those areas. I am not in government, city government. So at the time I thought to myself, well, the Peace Bus does humanitarian aid. How can we help these people? And that was with another sock drive. So we went around, gave out socks to these people who were being displaced, went to some of the homeless shelters in the area and did the same thing. And this is when I had another eye-opening moment. So after that happened, The idea was to get socks to anyone who didn't have them. So by Christmas, everyone in Tacoma would have a pair of socks. So like I explained before, I'm a caseworker. And so I have to go to some of these congregate care facilities. Some of my clients live here. So I'm at one of these shelters and I'm talking with one of my clients, and this guy comes in to the room and he's really dirty. He looks really dirty. He's kind of talking to himself a little bit, but he sits down and his dirty pants rise up. They were too small for him. And he had the whitest socks. And it stopped my conversation I was having with my client. And I turned to him and I was like, whoa, you got some nice socks, man. And he was like, yeah, you gave them to me. And I was like, really? And he was like, yeah, they're the best socks I've ever had. And I was like,
wow,
what? And he was like, yeah, thank you. And I was like, no problem, man. And that's when it hit me. Like it's the small things that are huge to people. They're so huge to other people. Things we take for granted are the world to others.
it's so true.
Yeah. So that was a really big moment. And so then at that same time, I got a call from a newscaster. And he was telling me that, the news really enjoys what you're doing with the Peace Bus. Have you thought about it being geared towards children? And I was like, oh, yeah, we've actually been going to schools, talking to kids about nonviolence. He's like, no, like a TV show. And I was like, no. And he's like, okay, tell you what, you write the script, you write it up, and maybe, the news will back it. If it's good, if we like it, if you like it and it's good. And I was like, okay, cool.
I didn't realize that was how the idea for the TV show came up, was that a news station called you.
Correct. I'll keep them disclosed for now, but yes, it was. Yeah. And so that happened. And then I was like, okay, well, this is an opportunity I can't just give up. Me, I'm not an entertainer. I'm not a comedian, but if this is a way that we can get more people involved in peace, sure. So I wrote the Peace Bus script that night. And then after creating it, maybe like 2 weeks later, my friend Kevin, who's a director, he came home from vacation. And I was like, hey, Kevin, I wrote this script. What do you think of it? And I read it to him. We're at Sherry's and I read it to him. And he's like, this is really good. You know what? He was like, I think this could actually be a show. Before you pitch it, let's do a pilot episode. And I was like, that sounds good. And so I started I asked him if he would direct it. He said, sure. And I started getting different people to help make this pilot episode. And to make a long story short, we shot it. This is mainly all through January and in February. And we completed it. And then we were going to do a premiere of the pilot episode last month. And that's when Corona hit. Now, I have postponed it to a date which I haven't announced, that in May, but who knows? If Corona is still at large, we might have to push it back further. But honestly, it's not the thing that I'm concerned about. I'm concerned about kids not having breakfast. That's what I'm concerned about right now. That's how I started the cereal fund, the breakfast fund.
We're going to take a quick break to hear from Right in Front of My Face sponsors. I am so excited to welcome the second sponsor for Right in Front of My Face Season 2, Tracy Erickson from Compass Real Estate. Tracy, there are, I don't know the exact number, but there are a lot of real estate agents in the world. And I would like you to tell people about why they should choose you.
Well, I would say I'm a market expert. I truly do understand what it takes to sell a home for the highest price. And of course, I understand for my buyers what it takes to compete in this crazy Seattle market.
Which is not easy.
No. But really, when it comes down to it, I'm a relationship person. I've worked really hard to build relationships with different agents and other realtors in the Seattle area. And I feel like that goes a really long way when one of my clients is making an offer on, another agent's listing, or they're making an offer on one of my clients' listings. I make it a priority to play nice in the sandbox, and that goes a long way.
I can relate, because my priority in the interviews that I find and the stories that I'm helping tell, I tend to listen more than I talk.
Yeah.
How does that fit in with your philosophy as an agent?
Well, I mean, I just think that's a life lesson, but
I'm still learning.
Oh gosh. Well, I mean, I treat all of my clients like they're friends or family. This just isn't a transaction to me. This is a relationship. And when the transaction ends, our relationship doesn't. For most people, this is the biggest transaction of their life, and they're going to experience every range of emotion, from excited to stressed to happy to sad. And I am there with them every step of the way.
Tracy, I appreciate your philosophy and your outlook and your authenticity. And thank you very much for your support of Right in Front of My Face.
Yeah.
Tell people where they can find you.
Well, my phone number is 206-251-6351. You can also jump onto the Compass website, compass.com, and type my name in, Tracy Erickson, and find me there. Or you can follow me on Instagram at Tracy Erickson Homes.
And I would highly recommend that area because her stories are wonderful.
Thank you.
Welcome back to my chat with Kwabi Amoah-Forson. So you and I had an interview scheduled on March 14th, I believe, which I could not make, and we weren't supposed to be seeing anybody at that point. So you gracefully agreed to come back on at a later point. But I saw what you were doing on Instagram because I follow you. You have a fantastic Instagram feed, and everybody should follow the Peace Bus. But you started doing this thing where you would pop into my stories every morning, lip syncing. And I started thinking, well, this is making me really happy. So I'm going to see what he's doing. And you have figured out a way to deliver cereal to kids in Tacoma who are reliant on school for their breakfast, correct?
That is correct. So basically what happened, I forget what weekend it was, but I think everyone has it in their mind, that weekend where Corona became
real.
And so they had canceled school. And the day after, the News Tribune came out with this article that said, families are still going to have trouble, even though that the school system is still going to be providing lunch at designated areas in the community where people can come and meet them for food. There are kids who won't be able to get there because they usually take the bus, or their family is busy and can't take them, or they just don't have the means towards getting to those designated areas. And so I thought to myself, well, the premiere is not happening. I have this time. I have the ability. I have a bus. Why not take meals to them, like where they're at, right where they're at? And so I thought, well, maybe I'll do Lunchables. But then I realized, I don't have a food handler's license. I'm not a restaurant. I can't take perishable items. So I did my research. I went on Google, was looking up or whatnot.
You're a smart
and
guy.
I found out that
you're an MBA in Googling.
Yeah, I know. I'm saying. But yeah, I got to make sure. So I went on there and found out that I could transfer non-perishable items. So oatmeal, cereal. And so I thought to myself, well, let's do cereal. This, mind you, Shannon, this happened overnight. I read the article and I was like, I got to do something. And then I called my mom up and I was like, what do you think about me taking food places? And she was like, you can't do that. Like, you don't have a license. I was like, oh, yeah. So then, just doing more research. That's how cereal came about. And the next day I went to my brother's house and I was like, hey, Kwasi, can you take a couple pictures of me holding this cereal in front of the Peace Bus? He's like, what's this for? And I was like, I think I'm going to start like this breakfast fund. He's like, sounds good. So he took some pictures, edited them, gave them to me. And then I believe it was Sunday, I announced that I would be buying cereal, going out and getting cereal for kids in need that were being affected by the coronavirus due to school closures. And that's how that blew up.
I mean, it blew up pretty well. You've collected over $5,000 at this point, haven't you?
Yeah. I was expecting 1,000. Yeah, and it was a lot more than that. King 5 News came to my house. They did a story on the Peace Bus, but mainly in relation to the breakfast fund. Granted, there's lots of people doing really good work at this point in time because of the coronavirus. There's lots of people going out, helping those in need. But he was saying that it's different in the sense that it's just me, and I'm also meeting people where they're at specifically. So basically what I put a phone number online. People can see that at www.thepeacebus.org. And my number's there. People text me.
Yeah, you're basically like, hey, hit me up if you need food.
Pretty much. And so these families, they'll message me. I'll ask them, what's their family size? How many kids? And then they give me an address. And in the morning, I get up 6:30 to about 10:30. I'm out in the community delivering cereal to families in need. Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about the General Mills connection that you have.
Oh, yeah. So the Northwest representative for Costco, he called me. He's like, hey, I got cereal. General Mills, we heard about what you're doing. We want to supply you with cereal for today and maybe possibly in the weeks to come.
Awesome.
So I met with him. He supplied me with a ton of General Mills cereal and told me that he would be in touch with me in the following weeks to hopefully supply the Peace Bus with more cereal to give out.
Amazing. I mean, again, and it's really nice to hear some corporations stepping up to support efforts like this, because it is this grassroots stuff that makes an incredibly real difference, whether it's socks, whether it's a box of cereal, that means something very real to people in a different form than a government stimulus check, which is good in its own right. But that is direct right now. We need this help.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you so much. Thank you for taking the time. That you're a pro, and I'm actually so honored that you agreed to come on. I appreciate it so much.
I appreciate you for having me, Shannon. This has been great. This has been great.
I am really excited to meet you in person. I'm not going to lie.
We got to do it. We got to set it up. When all this Corona stuff is over, that will happen. It will happen. It will happen because I'm going to be like in the front row of your premiere with my kids. We're going to make signs. It's going to be a whole thing. So just prepare yourself for the amount of glitter that's going to come your direction on opening day. My God. That is awesome.
Well, I mean, this was great. And I hope that if we put this out there, it's going to get you money to help keep you in this line of work. I think you found it.
I think so too. Any donations will go directly towards buying more cereal, and that's basically what we're doing right now. When school goes back, depending on how that goes, when school gets back, I'm planning on ending the breakfast fund, and then we'll continue with something else. But as long as the need is there, the Peace Bus will be there.
It's really such a good idea and beyond inspiring. And, we talk about all the first responders who are, total heroes. My kids and I made cookies for our fire station down the street from us. And
that's awesome.
But, there are people working on the front lines that are really taking the brunt of this risk. And then you have just decided to throw yourself on those front lines because there are so many kids who won't eat.
I
really wanted to give you a platform to talk about it. And obviously I'm going to put all your links up. Please, everyone listening, kick in $5, $10. This is happening right in front of us, and not just in Seattle, but in Tacoma, all over our state right now. And I really feel like I need to do more personally somehow, but putting out stuff like this is something I feel like I can contribute. And, thank you for putting yourself on the front line when you didn't have to.
I want to thank the medical workers, the firefighters, the police officers who are putting themselves on the front line to help each and every one of us to get through this time. I really appreciate you guys. You guys are awesome. You guys are true heroes.
Well, heroes come in different forms, Kwabi. And I have to say, like, your Instagram feed inspires me. My kids and I look at it. We're like, look, this is somebody, Mr. Rogers always says, look for the helpers. There are helpers everywhere. And that is you right now.
I appreciate it, Shannon.
And the irony of you, starting this journey down kids content. But that comparison is real. And to know that there's somebody out there who's like, well, I got this bus. There are a lot of hungry kids. What can I do? Is a very tangible, very real act of peace. And I appreciate that you are embodying what you're putting out there and what you're preaching.
I appreciate it, Shannon. Yeah, gotta practice what you preach.
Yeah, it's true. So I again, everybody, I will put all of Kwabi's information online, but look up the Peace Bus. Please support him in this work. When school comes back in session, which it will, talk to your administrators and see if you can get Kwabi to come up and talk to your kids. He's an incredibly charismatic individual, and I think has so much to offer the kids in our community. Well, there you have it. Proof yet again that one person can impact a community beyond what they ever imagined. I'm wrapping up this recording with no idea what the world is going to look like when I wake up in the morning. My hope is that whatever the outcome, we can move forward with the sole intention of lifting each other up. I've experienced so much anger. It's everywhere, even in myself. People have been rude in parking lots. A guy actually stood in front of my car to block me from getting a parking spot. This is behavior that's beyond what's ever been acceptable before. People have been impatient in lines at the store, mean to employees. There's this simmering anger and fear just below the surface, and I feel it too. I suppose my hope is that I can turn off the burner and focus on my world and how I can impact whatever small percentage of folks that is in a positive way. I'd like to recommit to listening to people that are different from me. And I'd like the conversations on my podcast to reflect that. I'm hoping that whatever happens, we commit to learning from each other and realizing that we have more similarities than differences. This Halloween, I stuck my neck out to my neighborhood and started a conversation about how we could possibly still do Halloween safely on our street. What resulted from that vulnerability was our neighborhood coming together in a way that I've never experienced, not in my 15 years of living on my street. My point in bringing it up is that despite who the president ends up being, we all have the potential to be leaders in our own community. Perhaps you can decide to recommit to stepping up for your neighbors and small community in the way that you'd like our national leadership to step up. For lack of a less cliche way to say it, be the change you want to see in the world. At the end of it all we control is our response to the world around us. Maybe this week, consider your response and try your hardest to be the example. Thank you so much for listening. Please find me on Twitter at InFrontOfMyFace. You can email me at infrontofmyface@gmail.com, or you can find me on Instagram at RightInFrontOfMyFace. This next week, be gentle with yourself and people around you. Please wear a mask and just try to be nice.